What if Napoleon had not just dreamed of world domination, but had actually achieved it? Imagine this, a small Corsican boy, barely reaching the stirrups of a horse, rewriting the map of Europe like a schoolboy on the blackboard, and at the same time, the fate of the world. Sounds like a plot for a Hollywood blockbuster, right? But wait, why do we still call him the little guy if he could have been the greatest winner in history? It's ironic. Napoleon Bonaparte, whom we know as a genius who lost because of the Russian winter and his own ambition, could be looking down on us now from the gold coins of some European imperium. Or we would all be speaking French while eating croissants for breakfast. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? The topic, what if Napoleon had won the Napoleonic Wars, is not just a game of historical puzzles. It is a chance to look into a parallel world where everything went differently. Borders, cultures, even fashion. Because you see, those tall hats of Napoleon would have had a chance to become a trend for centuries. Why is it so addictive? Because we all like to imagine, what if? What if one twist of fate changed everything? What if, instead of Brexit, we were arguing about who would get the best province in the great French Empire? And let's be honest, in real history, Napoleon often behaved like a comedy character, like when he tried to make friends with Russia and then remembered that he forgot his gloves before marching on Moscow. But what if he had beaten all his enemies like a chess grandmaster? This story is not just about Napoleon, it's about how tiny decisions can change the course of time. And we're going to dive into it like a good TV series, with unexpected twists and turns, light irony, and thoughts that will be in your head for a long time. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, or maybe some French wine to get you in the mood, and let's imagine what the world would look like if Napoleon hadn't stumbled. I promise you, it will be so interesting that you will forget to check your phone. Well, almost. So let's go back to 1815, the Battle of Waterloo. In real history, Napoleon lost everything here, his army, his empire, and his hope for the throne. But what if he had beaten Wellington and Blucher? Let's imagine that instead of the rainy mire that slowed down his cannons, Napoleon gets dry weather. His marshals, Ney and peers, do not confuse orders like students before an exam, but act precisely like a Swiss watch. The French army defeats the Allies and Napoleon enters Brussels in triumph. Europe is shocked but does not give up. This time, however, Napoleon has a plan, and more importantly, he is in no hurry to celebrate too soon. 1815 to 1820, Europe under the tricolor flag. After Waterloo, Napoleon does not stop. He concludes peace with Prussia, promising them a piece of Poland. A classic move. Give your neighbor candy so he won't complain. Austria, frightened by his new power, agrees to the alliance because Metternich, this master of backroom games, understands that it is better to be the winner's friend than his dinner. Alexander I's Russia remains in isolation. Napoleon avoids a new winter adventure, remembering how his army once warmed itself near burning Moscow huts. Great Britain, of course, does not give up, but without continental allies, its fleet can only sway menacingly in the English Channel. By 1820, Napoleon had created the Great European Confederation, something like the early European Union, only with his portrait on all the flags. France became the center and Paris the capital of the New World. But Napoleon is not just a tyrant in a shiny uniform. He introduces the Napoleonic Code everywhere, from Lisbon to Warsaw. Imagine this, a single legal system where a peasant can sue an aristocrat, and women, well, almost, get some rights. It is ironic that Napoleon, who once handed out crowns to his brothers like candy at a party, now makes them work as governors, not just pose for portraits. 1820 to 1830. A new world order. What does Napoleon do after consolidating Europe? He looks overseas. America is terra incognita for him, but he does not repeat the mistake with Louisiana, which he once sold for a pittance. Instead, he supports the Latin American revolutions against Spain, but with a condition. The new countries become part of his global network. Imagine Simón Bolívar drinking champagne with Napoleon in Caracas and signing a trade treaty at the same time. It's ironic that Napoleon, who once dreamed of an empire, becomes the first globalist. Only instead of Zoom conferences, he has pigeon mail and horse relays. Meanwhile, culture is flourishing in Europe. Without wars tearing the continent apart, Paris becomes a magnet for artists. Beethoven, instead of canceling his dedications to Napoleon, writes a new symphony for him. For example, imperial number, 5 quotation marks. Goethe and Byron travel to France as to modern New York, and French becomes the lingua franca. But not everything is so smooth. The British, of course, ignore the fashion for French words, defiantly drinking tea and calling Napoleon that impudent Corsican. Technology is not standing still either. Napoleon, who loved cannons more than poetry, invested in steam engines and railroads. By 1830, Europe is covered with a network of rails, and the first trans-European express rushes from Paris to Vienna. While Napoleon is building railroads, his enemies in London are muttering that he stole the idea from their Fulton. But who cares when you can get to Italy in a weekend? 1830 to 1850. Cracks in the empire. Napoleon dies in the 1830s, leaving the throne to his son, Napoleon II. But as is often the case, the son is not the father. The young emperor likes balls more than battles, and the Confederation begins to crack. The Poles want independence, the Germans grumble about the French yoke, and the Italians dream of their own state. It is ironic, Napoleon, who united Europe, unwittingly sowed the seeds of nationalism. But not everything is so gloomy. The Confederation's economy is thriving as never before. During his lifetime, Napoleon laid the foundations for a single market, no customs between countries, a common currency, say the franc of the empire, and even the first banks that issue loans to farmers for the upcoming harvest. Imagine a Bavarian farmer buying a new thresher because a bank in Paris believed in his wheat. It is ironic that Napoleon, who was once considered a tyrant, became the unwitting father of the middle class. However, aristocrats still grumble that they are forced to pay taxes like commoners. Oh, if only they could complain to Napoleon personally. Culture is also undergoing a revolution, not only in Paris but also in the provinces. Opera houses rivaling La Scala were opening in Milan, and magazines in French, German, and Polish were being published in Warsaw. Napoleon II, although not a strategist, turns out to be a patron of the arts. He finances art academies and even commissions the first European novel, Something About a Knight Who Travels Across the Confederation, reconciling Germans and French. Funnily enough, the book becomes a bestseller, and readers argue whether the author has copied the protagonist from Napoleon himself. Someone even jokes, if the old emperor had read this, he would have gone to war with the publisher for copyright. By 1850, the Confederation was turning into a cross between an empire and a hobby club, where everyone complained but no one dared to leave. And what about the rest of the world? The UK, having lost influence in Europe, is throwing all its energy into India and Africa, creating an empire that looks like a response to Napoleon. You took Europe? Well, we'll take half the globe. Russia, left out, focuses on Siberia and Alaska, dreaming of revenge. And America? The United States, without the pressure of European wars, is expanding more rapidly to the west, but is wary of French influence in Mexico. Impact on the present. If Napoleon had won, we would have lived in a world where Europe would have been a single federation with a French accent. French cuisine would have dominated restaurants, and English would have remained the language of island freaks. Technology might have developed faster due to early integration, but national conflicts would still have raged. Napoleon would not have been able to stifle the desire for freedom. Ironically, his dream of unity could have led to an even more diverse world. So, we have walked around the world where Napoleon not only won Waterloo, but reshaped the entire planet. Just imagine, we could live in Europe, where instead of arguing about the EU budget, everyone argues about what kind of cheese is worthy of the emperor's table, or drink coffee in a cafe where the menu is exclusively in French and the waiters sigh when you ask for tea instead of cafe. It's funny, but this world is not so far from ours. Napoleon lost, but his ideas about unity, order, and even croissants are still with us. Maybe we are all a little bit Napoleonic when we dream of big changes. This story shows how fragile our world is. One battle, one successful maneuver, and everything could have been different. Maybe we would have been proud of our European citizenship, or maybe we would have complained about the French bureaucracy. But the main thing is a reminder that history is not set in stone. It is as flexible as baguette dough and depends on the choices we make. If you like to think about what if, please like this story. It's like saying to Napoleon, "Bravo, old man, good move." Subscribe because we will play with history again and again, imagining how it would have turned out. Let's figure out together what would have happened if fate had played by different rules. See you in the next story, and don't forget to check if you have a triangular hat somewhere.